Hi everyone. Tonight, we travel together aboard a ship that groans beneath your steps. Its wooden beams are slick with ice, the deck shining like a frozen lake. You draw in air so cold it stings your throat, yet this is the very air Viking sailors once breathed, lungs tightening with the same shudder. Picture it clearly now. Dark water stretches without end. Above, winter stars glint like shards of glass, and below your boots rests a vessel made for raiding and trade, never for comfort. You are about to enter the world of men who somehow manage to sleep inside this drifting cage of cold. You likely would not last long. Not with the chill gnawing at your feet and waves hurling icy spray into your face. Still you try? So before settling in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy the content here. And let me know in the comments where you are in the world, and what time it is as you listen. Now, lower the lights and allow the ship to move you onward. You make your way across the deck, bending as the mast towers above, its rigging humming like tight harp strings in the wind. There is no cabin waiting, no private berth with soft bedding, no warm stove to ease your bones. Instead, the hull curves low and close. You spot sailors curled tightly against the planks, their bodies drawn in like resting animals. Rough wool cloaks serve as both blankets and armor against icy drafts slipping through every crack in the boards. The air is heavy with tar, fish oil, and damp rope. You wrinkle your nose, aware that after weeks at sea, these men barely noticed the smell. Historians agree Viking ships were feats of design, sleek, fast, and durable, built with overlapping planks sealed tightly enough to survive open seas and shallow rivers alike. But comfort was never part of the plan. Sleep was something taken when possible, not something provided. You lower yourself, studying the narrow gaps between oars where sailors wedged themselves shoulder to shoulder, forcing their minds to ignore the seawater seeping through the wood. One unusual detail comes to mind. Some accounts suggest sailors used their shields as temporary roofing, propping them along the gunwales to block wind and spray. The idea sounds clever until you imagine shifting in the dark, striking your head on iron rims, and waking with a bruised skull to match numb toes. You pause beside one man, his face half hidden in his sleeve, beard stiff with frost. Each breath forms a pale cloud that fades into the night like a small ghost. You wonder whether he truly slept, or if this was simply the body giving in to exhaustion. Historians still debate whether such journeys allowed any deep, restorative rest, or if sailors existed in a constant half-awake state, always ready to stir at the creak of timber or a lookout's call. Your fingers brush the deck, rough with salt crystals frozen sharp as needles. The ship feels alive beneath you, rising and falling like the chest of a resting creature. The motion should calm you, yet your body remembers the sting of the wind. You pull your cloak tighter, though it offers little defense against the creeping cold. In that moment, you understand what resilience meant to these men. Not heroic songs or battlefield glory, but the quiet struggle to sleep while the world worked against you. Nearby, two sailors edge closer together, shoulders pressed so tightly they appear as one shape. Shared warmth was not comfort, it was survival. The heat from another body could mean waking again, or not waking at all. A harsh snore cuts the air, followed by a cough, a reminder that life at sea was crowded, exposed, and far removed from the legends told on land. The hull groans. A wave strikes. You close your eyes, letting the steady tap of water against wood draw you toward a haze. For a brief moment, you slip toward the same fragile edge of sleep these sailors once knew, where dreams were brief, winter nights felt endless, and every heartbeat seemed borrowed. You open your eyes, though it is not truly you who wakes, but the sailors you follow. Their world offers no privacy and no ease. The low wooden hull strains under its own weight, revealing how little space exists between the working deck above and the shallow interior where men sometimes sought rest. You move carefully, ducking beneath beams, crouching into a space barely wide enough for bodies to lie side by side. The construction is brilliant and unforgiving. Viking ships used clinker-built hulls, overlapping boards riveted together to provide strength and flexibility against rough seas. You run your hand along a seam, feeling the pitch sealing it, coarse beneath your fingers. Yet for all its ingenuity, the design showed no concern for comfort. Sleeping here meant folding yourself against cold oak ribs, more like lying inside a wooden shell than resting on a bed. The air turns damp and heavy, as water always finds a way inside. Your senses catch mildew, fish oil, and human sweat trapped in the confined space. It is widely accepted that Vikings rarely included permanent sleeping areas. Even larger longships had no fixed bunks. Men rested wherever the curve of the hull allowed, sometimes lying atop sea chests, using them as storage by day and rigid mattresses by night. Still, one curious detail appears in later stories. Some suggest certain crews stretched canvas between the ribs of the hull, creating simple hammocks. If true, this would have been an uncommon comfort, a gentle sway within the ship's own motion. Yet historians remain divided on whether such arrangements truly existed on Viking vessels, or if they were later additions inspired by Mediterranean seafaring traditions. You imagine the crew positioning themselves shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip, a dense tangle of limbs and cloaks packed together like firewood stacked to keep embers alive. It is widely accepted that Viking sailors rarely slept alone during winter voyages. Cold was a real threat, and sharing body heat carried no shame. You observe two men edging closer, their cloaks overlapping until they merge into a single mass, their breath rising in pale clouds. This closeness is practical rather than tender, though after weeks at sea, the line between necessity and companionship may have softened. One unusual custom appears in oral traditions. Some crews intentionally paired younger men with older ones, allowing youthful strength to support aging bodies, while the elders repaid this with experience and guidance on enduring the cold. This arrangement was not about comfort in a modern sense, but about survival methods embedded in nightly routines. You can almost watch the pairings happen naturally, like birds pressing together during a storm. Historians continue to debate whether this behavior was universal or only occasional. Some argue that the absence of direct written references suggests it was too common to record, while others believe it followed rules, perhaps shaped by rank, family ties, or ritual. Agreement is elusive, yet the scene before you makes one thing clear. In bitter darkness, closeness meant survival. You lower yourself, hearing cloaks rustle. A sailor murmurs in his sleep, his hand reaching out to drag another arm across his chest like an added blanket. The air is thick with the scent of unwashed wool, sweat, and salted fish embedded in every fold of fabric. Still, the warmth beneath it all is undeniable. You feel your shoulders ease, calmed by the steady heat radiating from so many bodies sharing such limited space. It is a strange picture. Men known for raids and warfare reduced at night to a shivering pile, clinging together for warmth. Yet history often strips away grandeur this way. Warriors by daylight, fragile sleepers after dark. In that fragility, they appear more human. You imagine the awkward nudges, elbows pressed into ribs, muffled complaints when someone shifted too far or pulled a cloak unevenly. Minor annoyances, certainly, but far better than freezing. Later folklore even tells of a crew that insisted on singing before settling down. A low chant that synchronized their breathing. When the song ended, they lay down together, their snores eventually falling into the same rhythm, as if the melody lingered in their lungs. Whether exaggerated or not, you almost detect a faint hum beneath the creaking timbers. You place your hand on the deck, feeling it vibrate under their combined weight. The boards are damp and cold against your skin, yet faintly warmed by the bodies above. That small warmth is a reminder that survival on these ships depended not only on weapons and armor, but on skin against skin, heat transferred from chest to chest. Your own posture begins to mimic theirs. Knees tucked in, shoulders hunched, you imagine squeezing between two sailors. Would the smell bother you? Perhaps at first. But after hours in biting wind, you might welcome any warmth, even a stranger's breath against your cheek. Not everyone accepted this closeness willingly. Some sagas hint at sailors stubborn enough to lie apart, asserting independence, only to crawl back, shaking with cold before dawn. The lesson was immediate. Pride succumbs to frost faster than flesh. And so, night after night, the human bundle formed again. Cloaks spread, bodies overlapped, the sea faced together. Outside, the wind howls like a wolf stalking prey. Inside, the crew sleeps, tangled in quiet defiance. And you, unseen among them, feel for the first time the comfort of their closeness. Rough, awkward, yet absolutely necessary. The night stretches on, and your gaze drifts upward to the vast canvas above. The sail looms like a living creature, swelling and sighing with every gust. You lie back briefly, the deck pressing into your shoulders, and realize how often sailors try to rest beneath those shifting wings. At first it seems reckless. Who would sleep under something that could drop ropes or snap loose in a storm? Yet when choices were limited, even the sail's shadow offered relief. Ship reconstructions show that Viking sails were enormous, usually woven from thick wool and treated with animal fat or tar to repel wind and water. They were heavy, sometimes requiring more than a dozen men to carry when dry, and even heavier when soaked. For sailors, that weight overhead was not just propulsion. It was protection. By lying beneath the angled canvas, they shielded themselves from sleet and spray, a fragile roof in an otherwise exposed world. Folklore includes an intriguing claim that some sailors stretched spare canvas or hides between the mast and the gunwales to create a crude tent. Picture crawling under that damp cover, hearing the wind pound above while drops of tarred water fell around you. It was hardly comfortable, but compared to lying fully exposed on wet planks, it must have felt like shelter beneath heaven's own cloak. Researchers are unsure how common this practice was. Some suggest the danger of snapping ropes or collapsing sails would have discouraged men from staying beneath them. Others argue that exhaustion makes people accept risks they might otherwise avoid. When sleep pulls at you relentlessly, safety becomes a distant concern. You roll to one side and watch two sailors claim a spot directly beneath the mainsail. They lean their backs against the mast, using it as a barrier, while the canvas blocks part of the cold mist drifting in. Their cloaks are spread wide, trapping whatever still air they can find. The mast creaks above them, the wood groaning as if it too longs for rest. A thought occurs to you. The sound of the sail flapping may have soothed them, much like curtains moving in a cottage at night. To modern ears it is harsh, a mix of cracking snaps and rolling thunder. But for them, it likely faded into background noise, a steady rhythm that invited sleep. You feel your own eyelids grow heavy as the pattern repeats. Wave after wave, gust after gust, a lullaby only the sea could provide. The dangers, of course, never disappeared. A sudden gust could snap a line, sending it whipping down without warning. There are accounts of sailors struck by rigging while sleeping nearby, and you wonder how many men woke in panic, scrambling from beneath the sail as storms broke overhead. Even so, one fact remains. They returned to that shelter repeatedly. The promise of partial protection outweighed fear. One almost humorous image lingers in your mind. Sailors jolting awake as drops of tar or sheep fat dripped onto their foreheads from the treated cloth above. You allow yourself a brief smirk at the image, though for them, it was no laughing matter. Clothes soaked, hair tacky, eyes burning. Even so, they endured, because a damaged shelter was still better than none. As you settle beneath the imagined sail, your senses take in the surroundings. The smell of tar hangs heavy, mixed with salt and sweat. The canvas shifts and rattles like a drumhead struck by unseen hands. Plore, who faced storms and combat, reduced at night to crouching like children beneath a vast blanket. In that shelter, they found brief calm, moments of pause. Their rest was never complete or peaceful, but it was sufficient to push the body onward. Your eyes close again, though your hearing stays alert to the creak, the snap, the constant groan of wood. You allow yourself to sink into the planks, pressed against the ship's core, while the sail above serves as your roof, just as it once did for them. As night deepens, you notice how every breath turns to vapor. The cold is so intense that simply exhaling creates a small white shape before your face, lifting, thinning, and disappearing into the dark. Looking around, you see the same pale clouds drifting from the sailors as they sleep. The deck feels inhabited by these brief forms, a quiet gathering of mist that lasts only a moment. Archaeological findings confirm that Viking voyages reached Greenland and even the icy edges of North America, meaning the winters they faced were far from mild. The cold froze moisture in beards, stiffened hair like dry straw, and coated the planks with frost. You bend down and touch the deck. Your fingers cling briefly to the wood. The cold is that severe. Here, breathing itself feels like evidence of being alive. One striking detail appears in sagas and later accounts. Sailors sometimes joked that with every breath out, their souls slipped free, drifting into the night before returning. It may have been grim humor, or perhaps an attempt to explain the glowing mist that hovered around sleeping men like an extra layer. You imagine those jokes murmured through chattering teeth, bleak and foolish, yet revealing how closely belief and survival intertwined aboard these ships. Today, scholars still debate how sailors managed such cold without fire. A hearth could warm a house on land, but at sea, a single spark could destroy the ship. Some suggest they depended entirely on shared body warmth and wool, while others think small braziers were used in extreme situations. There is no agreement, leaving the image of frozen breath as an unresolved question. How did men fall asleep when the air itself threatened their lives? You move closer to a line of huddled figures. Their faces catch faint moonlight. Their eyes are shut, yet their lips shift as if whispering even in rest. Frost gathers along their beards, forming tiny icicles that click softly when they move. You imagine waking to find your mustache frozen together, pulling painfully as you try to speak. The discomfort almost seems amusing until you remember this was not a rare night, but one repeated over and over, for weeks at sea. Folklore mentions one unusual habit, rubbing snow across the face before sleeping. Perhaps numbing the skin dulled the cold enough to invite rest. You hesitate at the idea of freezing yourself on purpose to fool the mind into ignoring the chill. It sounds unreasonable, yet desperation often leads to stress, but the sense of security likely outweighed the inconvenience. You can almost hear the soft clink of metal each time a man shifts in his sleep. Not all scholars agree on how common this habit was. Some historians argue that weapons piled nearby would have been sufficient, while others believe the culture of readiness ran so deep that warriors treated their axes like pillows, never allowing them beyond arm's reach. With no firm physical evidence, the question remains unresolved. Still, as you watch the crew sleeping pressed against steel, the logic feels clear. Alertness mattered as much as warmth. You move closer to one man, his head resting against the shaft of a spear. The wood is polished smooth, darkened by years of use. His breathing breaks into a rough, tired snore, yet his arm stays hooked over the weapon, as if even in dreams he refuses to let it go. Nearby, another man has tucked his axe beneath his chest, the cold iron pressing against his ribs. The thought makes you shudder, but for him it is reassurance, not discomfort. A strange episode from saga literature comes to mind. One story tells of a warrior who woke so suddenly during a raid that he swung his axe before he was fully aware, striking the mast instead of an enemy. The crew reportedly laughed and nicknamed him the Dream Fighter. The splintered wood, however, hinted at how dangerous that moment truly was. It shows how thin the line was between sleep and wakefulness, how the mind never fully rested when threats were close. The ship creaks, and you imagine how every sound might rouse these men. The slap of water on the hull, the shriek of rope, even the sigh of wind could all be mistaken for danger. Sleep under such conditions was shallow and broken, easily disrupted by the echo of possible attack. You feel it yourself, your body tensing at each noise, never fully giving in to rest. Weapons beside the sleepers served another purpose as well, morale. For a Viking, strength and preparedness were central to identity. Even in sleep, to be seen with an axe close at hand was to remain a warrior. Perhaps this brought comfort, a reminder that they were never helpless or truly defenseless, no matter how unforgiving the sea. The faint metallic smell of iron mixes with the salt air. It catches in your nose, sharp and unpleasant, yet grounding. You glance at the cluster of weapons, blades dulled by rust, spears bristling like thorns, and realize they were as much a part of the bedding as cloaks or animal hides. The sailor did not choose between warmth and alertness. He held on to both, trading softness for safety. You close your eyes and imagine lying there yourself. An axe beneath your hand, a cloak across your chest, the ship rolling below. The contradiction becomes clear. Comfort did not come from letting go, but from gripping tighter, even in sleep. The sea moves beneath you, not violently, but with a steady rhythm. The hull rises and falls, each motion slow and heavy, like the breathing of some vast, sleeping creature under the waves. For men who lived on these ships, this motion became both burden and cradle. At times it threatened to throw them into the water. On calmer nights, it lulled them into a deeper sleep than land ever could. Modern reconstructions of Viking longships, tested on open water, show how their shallow keels allowed them to skim across waves almost like skaters on ice. This design gave speed and maneuverability, but also meant constant motion, never fully still. Sleeping aboard such a vessel required surrendering to the sea's sway. You lie flat, feeling the planks press into your back, and soon the rhythm settles into your body. It is impossible not to move with it. A curious account from a later Icelandic chronicle tells of a sailor who claimed he could no longer sleep on land after years at sea. Solid ground felt lifeless beneath him. Only when lying in a rocking hammock could he drift into dreams. Imagine a life so shaped by waves that unmoving earth felt foreign. Experts still debate whether this rocking helped or hindered rest. Some suggest the unsteady deck prevented true deep sleep, while others argue the human body adapts, sinking into the motion until it becomes as natural as breathing. Watching the sailors now, their limbs slack, their snores rising and falling with the waves, you find yourself agreeing with the latter view. The surrounding sounds blend into a kind of lullaby. The creak of oars against their bindings, the low hum of rigging vibrating in the wind, the steady slap of waves on the hull. Together they form a rhythm that is strangely soothing. It is no gentle song by a hearth, but the sea's music works all the same. One odd piece of folklore claims that some sailors timed their sleep to the ship's movement, believing they could only drift off after 3 tilts to starboard and 2 to port. Superstition, perhaps, but you can imagine lying awake, counting the sways like a child counts sheep, until drowsiness finally takes hold. You roll onto your side, copying their posture, and notice how naturally their bodies curve with the ship. A man sprawled beside a chest shifts unconsciously with each rise and fall, never waking, his arms sliding across the boards as if he has practiced this motion in his sleep countless times. Another snores loudly, his breathing matching the sea's pulse, as though the waves themselves are playing him like an instrument. It is striking to realize that for these sailors, the ocean did more than carry them. It also cradled them. The same force that could overturn their world was what rocked them into the little rest they managed to claim. Perhaps in this contradiction lies the secret of their endurance, fear and comfort bound together until they could not be separated. Your own eyelids begin to sink. The planks beneath you feel harder than stone, yet the movement above them eases the discomfort. You let the motion carry you forward, then back, again and again, until you too feel the strange lullaby of the sea. And so the night passes not in silence but in rhythm, a song without melody, a cradle without walls, rocking the weary men who entrusted themselves to the mercy of the waves. The deck is never completely still. Even when much of the crew rests beneath cloaks and coverings, at least one person remains awake, watching the horizon. You turn your eyes toward the bow and notice a lone figure on guard, shoulders drawn tight against the cold, gaze fixed on the dark water ahead. The system is straightforward. Some men sleep while others stand watch, rotating through the night in a repeating cycle that keeps the ship secure and operational. Both saga accounts and maritime custom confirm that Viking crews divided their time into watches. This ensured that the entire crew was never asleep at once, since danger could appear without warning. Raiders might emerge, storms could form suddenly, or the vessel might drift off course. By sharing responsibility, the crew managed fatigue while maintaining awareness, a rhythm that matched the steady motion of the sea. An interesting detail appears in oral tradition. Certain men reportedly preferred standing watch to attempting rest on freezing planks. Remaining upright in the open air, with purpose and movement, could feel less unpleasant than lying still in damp wool, shivering through broken sleep. You picture the odd relief of pacing the deck, stamping feet to stay warm instead of twisting uncomfortably in shallow rest. Historians still debate how structured these watches truly were. Some suggest formal shifts assigned by leaders, while others argue the system was informal, with restless sailors simply taking over the duty. With no clear written records, the truth likely lies between these views. Watching the tired guard at the bow, you sense that strict organization mattered less than the simple fact that someone remained alert while others slept. The experience of night watch has its own character. The sailor leans into the wind, his cloak snapping against his legs, while behind him the ship feels unusually quiet. Soft snores and sighs drift across the deck, broken only by the creak of wood and the slap of waves against the hull. The watchman listens carefully for anything out of place, the strike of distant oars, seabirds signaling land, or a subtle change in the wind. The role is isolating, but it carries authority. For a short time, the safety of everyone aboard depends on his attention. Later accounts mention a superstition in which watchmen carried rune-carved charms for keen eyesight, believing these objects could help them detect threats in fog or darkness. You imagine a sailor rubbing a small bone etched with symbols, drawing resolve from it as the cold tested his focus. You lower yourself among the sleeping men. Their trust is unspoken but absolute. They have placed their lives in the hands of those who remain awake. One sailor lies tightly wrapped in his cloak, mouth open, breathing evenly. Another shifts in his sleep, murmuring softly as his axe taps against the boards. None react to the sound of the sea. They depend entirely on the one or two figures standing watch at the prow. Because of the rotating shifts, rest comes in fragments, 4 hours at a time, sometimes less if storms intervene, followed by wakefulness and labor again. This is not the deep rest of life on land, where the body can fully recover, but broken pieces of sleep stitched together across endless nights. You wonder how their minds endured it, how dreams shattered and blurred until waking and sleeping felt nearly identical. You move closer to the watchman. His eyes catch the starlight, his breath forming pale clouds in the air. He stares outward, but perhaps also inward, counting time until relief or repeating familiar stories to stay alert. He shifts his stance, stamping frostbitten feet and muttering under his breath, yet his attention never leaves the horizon. Eventually, another man rises, stiff and groaning, rubbing eyes heavy with sleep. The watch changes. One man settles down gratefully, pulling his cloak tight, while the other takes his place at the bow. The cycle continues, unceasing, essential, and enduring. For sailors crossing winter seas, sleep was never a private act but a shared system, a constant trade between weariness and responsibility. To rest was to trust. To stay awake was to protect. Night after night, they shared not only cloaks and warmth, but vigilance itself, weaving safety into fragile rest. The quiet of the watch slowly gives way to the deeper murmur of sleep. You sense what fills the sailors' minds when they finally yield to exhaustion: dreams. Not refined visions shaped by poetry, but raw images born of hunger, longing, and the endless pulse of waves. Leaning closer, you can almost enter their sleep, eyelids fluttering, lips twitching with faint murmurs. These visions are intense, colored by need and memory. Saga poetry records that seafarers often spoke of yearning for the hearth, the smell of burning wood, glowing embers, and laughter echoing through a longhouse. You observe one sailor with his hand curled as if holding something unseen. In his mind, perhaps he grips a cup of warm ale or reaches toward a fire blazing in a stone hearth. His breathing steadies, and frost clinging to his beard glitters like sparks in firelight. Later storytellers mention a belief that dreams at sea carried omens. Seeing fire was thought to signal a safe return, while dreaming of breaking ice warned of danger. You can almost hear the morning whispers, sailors trading fragments of dreams, searching for meaning in each image. Scholars still disagree on how seriously such omens were taken. Some argue they influenced decisions, turning ships back or pushing them onward, while others see them as idle talk born of fatigue. No clear evidence settles the question, leaving the boundary between superstition and survival uncertain. Yet watching the twitching hands and half-spoken names, you sense the importance dreams held for them. As the men sleep, the surrounding scents subtly change. Cloaks damp with sweat and salt carry a faint animal musk, while the sea air remains sharp and briny. This mixture of smells, familiar and unpleasant, surely shaped their dreams as well. Imagine resting amid the odors of wool, tar, fish, and unwashed bodies. It is no surprise that visions of home fires and open fields burned so brightly behind closed eyes. One unusual detail appears in an Icelandic legal fragment. A sailor claimed he dreamed of his wife singing, her voice blending with the creak of the mast, and when he woke, he insisted he could still hear her. Was it imagination, or did the sound of wood twist itself into memory? Likely both. Dreams at sea fed on real sensations, reshaping them into distant faces and voices. You lean closer to a young man, his breathing shallow, fingers moving as if weaving. Perhaps he dreams of a loom in his mother's hall, or sisters singing as they spun wool. Beside you, an older sailor breathes deeply, his snoring low and steady, almost like a chant repeated in sleep. His dreams may be filled with feasts, with long stories sung near a fire, with children climbing onto his knees. With every breath, he drifts farther from the cold reality biting at his skin. The motion of the ship works its way into their minds as well. You notice how their bodies subtly adjust with each swell, turning the rocking of the vessel into the rhythm of their dreams. One man shows a faint smile, calmed by the gentle movement, perhaps imagining himself lying in a cradle once more, guided by his mother's hand. The sea, ruthless during the day, becomes a strange guardian at night, sometimes harsh, sometimes gentle, always unavoidable. Even you begin to slip into that state, suspended between their imagined worlds and your own. Brief images surface: a warm hearth, firelight reflecting off wood, the smell of fresh bread pulled from an oven. Then the creak of the mast breaks through, reshaping the vision into smoke rising from a distant roof, far away, yet within reach. Here, dreams blur the line between sea and land, between present suffering and remembered comfort. For the Vikings, these dream-filled moments may have been their only true release. Daylight demanded travel, battle, and endurance. Night offered something else. Wrapped in damp cloaks and pressed against wood and iron, they escaped into worlds gentler than the ones surrounding them. Even when those visions were short, broken, or distorted by hunger, they were still treasures held until dawn. You look along the row of sleepers, warriors who appear fierce by day, yet by night resemble children again, smiling, murmuring, gripping comforts that exist only in memory. Their thoughts of home fires seem brighter than the stars above. You feel a similar warmth stir in your chest as you drift alongside them into the fragile shelter of sleep. Your attention moves toward the center of the ship, where shadows lie thickest. Sailors there curl against the hull, cloaks drawn close, faces partly hidden. You expect some hint of firelight easing the darkness, but there is none. The deck is lit only by moonlight and faint stars. Then it becomes clear: aboard these ships, fire could not exist. Archaeological reconstructions and historical agreement confirm that flames on wooden vessels coated with tar and resin were an ever-present danger. One stray ember could ignite the rigging and turn the ship into a burning beacon at sea. Viking sailors understood this risk, feared it, and accepted the consequences. Nights colder than most land dwellers could imagine. You pull your arms in tighter, feeling the cold sink deeper without even the comfort of glowing embers to resist it. Medieval writers sometimes commented on northern seafarers, amazed that they could survive without fire, as if they were half otherworldly, shaped for cold and darkness. The description exaggerates, yet it carries some truth. You picture foreign traders watching Viking crews with disbelief, wondering how men could sleep wrapped only in cloaks and hides where others would demand braziers or torches. Modern scholars still debate whether small portable heat sources were ever used at sea. Some experimental archaeologists argue that clay-lined containers might have offered brief warmth during calm conditions. Others reject the idea as dangerously irresponsible. No evidence survives to confirm either position, leaving the question unresolved. What remains certain is what you see now: frost spreading across the timbers, no spark, no glow, only the quiet endurance of men who accepted nights without fire. You move closer to a group of sleepers. Their breath forms pale clouds in the air. Teeth chatter softly, even in sleep. One sailor grips his cloak tighter, whispering unintelligibly, while another has buried himself so deeply into his hood that only the tip of his nose shows, raw and red. Above, the mast creaks, a sound made more unsettling without the soft crackle of a hearth to soften it. Silence dominates, heavy and unbroken. Yet within it, small comforts emerge. An old Icelandic tale speaks of sailors who believed the sea itself offered warmth. They claimed the endless movement beneath them created the illusion of lying beside a great sleeping creature, its heat rising through the boards. It was likely imagination, but as you shiver, the idea feels understandable. The mind clings to any explanation that allows sleep to come. You press your palm against the deck. The wood is damp, cold, unresponsive. There is no warmth there. Still, as time passes, numbness dulls the discomfort, and soon the body accepts its own deception. Perhaps the sailors were right in a way. Sometimes comfort is nothing more than a belief held firmly enough. Without fire came the loss of ritual. On land, evenings ended around flames, stories shared, cups passed, warmth spreading through both body and spirit. Here, no such gathering existed. There was no circle of light, no dancing shadows. Only distant stars and the pale shine of frost on wool. Sleep arrived without laughter or shared stories. It came quietly, alone and resigned. Yet they endured. They pressed closer together, pulled cloaks tight, leaned into one another until shared body heat replaced the hearth. Where fire was forbidden, they created warmth from flesh and breath, forming a living flame. The night was harsher for it, but survival remained possible. You close your eyes with them. Cold presses in. Your ears sting. There is no fire, no embers, only the steady breathing around you, the human hearth built from determination. In this bleak moment, you begin to grasp the resilience of those who crossed open seas guided by stars alone, relying on their own bodies for warmth. Leaning closer to the planks, you catch the sharp smell of mildew. The boards are damp, always damp, and so are the cloaks spread over them. No matter how often the men shook them out or hung them in the weak daylight, the sea's moisture always returned. You imagine lying down wrapped in that wet weight, wool clinging cold to skin, stiff with salt, never fully drying. Archaeological finds from Viking sites reveal garments soaked and stained, fibers hardened by brine. Scholars generally agree that on long voyages, once clothing became wet, it rarely dried completely. The sea allowed no relief. Cloaks served as blankets, and when they absorbed spray, rain, or sweat, they became heavy and clammy burdens. You run your hand across one such cloak. It compresses slightly, almost alive. Folklore hints at an unusual habit. Some sailors deliberately soaked their cloaks, wrung them out forcefully, and then used them for sleep, believing freshly wrung wool insulated better than fabric left half damp. The image is striking, twisting cloth until hands ached, then wrapping yourself in the same chilled material. Strange, yet desperation may have given it logic. Even today, researchers disagree on how extreme this constant dampness truly was in daily practice. Some claim that constant wind dried clothing faster than we might expect, while others argue that the damp of North Atlantic winters never truly lifted, soaking into every stitch. The reality likely sits between these views. Still, standing among these shivering men, you feel it directly. A lasting chill, a wet cold like an unwelcome touch along your spine. You hear sailors shifting in discomfort. One coughs, his throat raw from the heavy air. Another scratches his chest where coarse will rub skin, irritated by salt. The smell is impossible to ignore, rot, brine, and sweat mixed together. Even sleep offers no escape. Their dreams are surely marked by that scent. A strange story preserved in later tradition tells of sailors joking that their cloaks grew scales like fish after weeks at sea, salt hardening until the cloth seemed alive. The joke carries truth. You look down and notice crystals glinting faintly in moonlight, sharp as glass, sparkling where spray dried unevenly. The cloak is no soft bedding but a harsh layer, both protection and punishment. Yet the misery does not stop them from wearing it night after night. What alternative do they have? One sailor pulls his damp cloak tighter, ignoring the odor. Another turns onto his side, pressing his face into fabric that reeks of the sea, as if closeness might bring acceptance. Their bodies adapt. Their tolerance increases. What once felt unbearable becomes normal. The sound of waves striking the hull seems louder in the wet air, as though the sea itself slips into every fold of cloth. The deck beneath feels slick, almost slimy, your hand leaving a dark mark where it rests. And still the men sleep, not deeply, not comfortably, but enough to recover a small measure of strength. You picture their relief upon reaching land, shedding those cloaks and spreading them before a true fire until steam rose from the wool. Perhaps the smell never vanished entirely, but the warmth must have made the hardship feel worthwhile. For now, there is no such comfort. They lie wrapped in dampness, letting exhaustion overcome discomfort. You pull the imagined cloak around your shoulders, feel its heavy wetness settle, and give in to the same uneasy rest. The night feels endless, and you sense how differently time moves at sea. On land, winter nights eventually yield to dawn, and people wake refreshed after warm, long sleep. Out here, rest comes in fragments, interrupted by watches, waves, and cold. For sailors bound to these voyages, weeks blurred together until every night felt identical, a cycle of fatigue and survival. Archaeological finds and historical estimates remind us that Viking journeys could last months, sometimes half a year, depending on route and weather. Sailing from Scandinavia to Greenland or east toward Finland meant enduring not a handful of harsh nights, but entire seasons of wet planks and shivering bodies. You imagine lying down for the 20th time in the same damp cloak on the same narrow board, your back aching in the same spot. The sameness itself becomes a form of suffering. One remark preserved in saga literature suggests that sailors sometimes lost track of days, measuring time only by watch changes and food rations. The voyage became nothing more than waking, sleeping, eating, and rowing. One line implies, you feel the dull uniformity yourself, the deck always wet, the air always biting, the sea always groaning below. Historians still debate how sailors endured mentally. Some believe stories and songs kept them sane. Others argue that the steady rhythm of labor, row, eat, sleep, row again, numbed the mind into acceptance. There is no clear answer, only the puzzle of men who adapted to monotony so heavy it would overwhelm most today. You watch a sailor roll onto his side, groaning softly, his hand reaching for the same place on his chest where he tucks his axe each night. Another shifts to brace his shoulder against the mast, claiming the same position he has used for weeks. Habits turn into rituals, patterns that anchor them against disorder. Even in exhaustion, repetition brings comfort. This is my place. This is how I sleep. This is how I wake. An unusual tale from later folklore tells of a crew who claimed they shared the same dream after so many nights of hardship. Each man described the same hall, fires blazing, the same feast waiting. Was it chance, or proof that endless routine shaped even their dreams into sameness? You smile at the idea, warriors by day, but perhaps dreamers together by night. The sounds of the voyage close in. Snores rise and fall with the rocking ship. A man coughs, phlegm rattling, then sinks back into uneasy quiet. The deck creaks in a rhythm you now recognize, as if the ship repeats the same refrain endlessly. You realize how quickly familiarity creates a strange calm. Even suffering becomes predictable, and in predictability lies endurance. Your own body begins to copy theirs. You draw up your knees, tuck your arms, adjust your cloak exactly as before. The repetition soothes you, even as it dulls the mind. Perhaps this is the secret to surviving endless winter journeys, abandoning the hope of comfort and settling instead for sameness. Weeks stretch ahead. The ship will not change. The sea will not soften. The planks will never grow kinder. Yet each night the sailors give a few more hours to sleep, proving that humans can adapt even to the harshest conditions. And you, lying among them, begin to understand how they endured not just nights but whole seasons afloat, half asleep, half awake, always moving toward the unknown. Just before sleep fully takes hold, the men sometimes break the monotony. You hear it start as a low murmur, nearly lost beneath the ship's creak. Then another voice joins, then another, until the deck hums softly with song. This is their comfort, They're ritual, not loud battle chants, but quiet sagas, fragments of verse and lullabies shaped like epic tales. Saga literature tells us that Norse culture lived through oral tradition. Every hall echoed with poetry. Every family preserved memory through spoken word. On a ship far from hearth and audience, the habit continued. Men whisper lines from Eddic poems, recalling gods and heroes, or stretch work songs into slow, gentle melodies. You hear the rhythm now, uneven but earnest, threading through the darkness. One note from folklore suggests some crews believed singing before sleep kept evil spirits at bay, those said to lurk on the waves. A verse about Thor's hammer might serve as both story and shield. You imagine a man pulling his cloak tighter as he murmurs of Mjolnir striking giants, persuading himself that its echo can shatter frost and fear alike. Specialists remain divided on how common this practice truly was. Some argue that surviving verses suggest nearly every voyage featured song, while others warn that silence may have been the norm, with only select crews engaging in ritualized singing. Records are inconclusive, yet as you hear the quiet chorus ripple across the deck, its likelihood feels real. The sound calms even the most restless. A sailor shivering by the mast closes his eyes, letting the voices wash over him. Another murmurs the final line of a saga like a prayer before settling into sleep. The songs do not chase away the cold, but they offer a sense of familiarity. For a brief moment, the ship ceases to feel like a drifting coffin and becomes more like a hall under stars. One anecdote from later retellings describes a crew singing body verses before bed, laughing despite frostbite. Their humor was said to anger the sea itself. Soon after, a storm arose, and they vowed never again to mock the waves. You imagine the awkward quiet that followed, men whispering solemn sagas, wary of the sea listening too closely. The environment itself seems to change with the singing. The timber's groan takes on rhythm, syncing with the voices. Water splashing against the hull becomes percussion. Even the whistle of wind through the rigging seems to harmonize. For a fleeting moment, the entire vessel transforms into an instrument, carrying the lullabies into the cold night. Gradually, the voices taper off. A line is left unfinished as one man drifts away. Another hums softly until snoring takes over. What remains is a fragile echo, a song dissolving into dreams. The silence afterward feels different, not bleak, but sacred, as if the night itself has been blessed by verse. You inhale more easily, imagining singing a line yourself, perhaps clumsily, off-key, yet enough to join the current. The act is less about sound and more about surrender. By voicing these ancient words, you connect with something larger, a chain stretching from farmstead to sea, from ancestors to the present. The songs fade. The men lie asleep, cloaks pulled tight, the ship creaking, the sea murmuring, yet the memory of the words lingers. Among them, you feel the reassurance of ritual, that even in harsh nights, humanity makes room for beauty before yielding to sleep. As the night deepens, the cold intensifies. You pull your cloak tighter, wool scratching at your neck, toes numbing despite the layers. For Viking sailors, this numbness was no minor discomfort but a serious threat, frostbite, creeping silently and claiming fingers and toes before dawn. Climate studies and skeletal evidence confirm that North Atlantic voyages exposed crews to freezing conditions capable of permanent injury. Even summer seas were biting. In winter, frostbite was ever present. You notice a sailor's bare hand where his cloak slipped, fingers pale, nails darkening at the edges. He draws it back, pressing it to his chest. Some folklore mentions sailors rubbing animal fat onto extremities before sleep, hoping it trapped warmth. Imagine coating your toes with tallow, greasy and pungent, wrapping them in damp wool, praying the combination held frost at bay. It may have been unpleasant but potentially life-saving. Scholars debate its effectiveness. Some argue it offered real insulation, others claim it attracted vermin or wore off on wet boards. The practice remains speculative, but vividly imaginable. Faces drift before you, breaths rising in pale clouds, eyelids fluttering between waking and dreaming. One stirs, curling tighter, instinctively knowing that stillness invites the cold. You understand the survival instinct. Stretch toes, flex fingers, shift weight, do anything to keep frost from claiming them. A saga fragment tells of a man who awoke screaming, dreaming his feet were burning, only to find frostbite had numbed them completely. Companions rubbed his legs furiously, blending dream and reality, pain and cold intertwined. You shiver at the thought, grateful for your own warmth. The ship offers little mercy. Frost clings to plank edges, sparkling like tiny blades in moonlight. Sailors lie against this frozen surface, cloaks barely protective. How many woke to frost-imprinted skin? Yet, despite the danger, you see one sailor shift close to another, cloaks overlapping, feet pressed together. Shared warmth becomes survival, not just comfort. One man's heat can mean the difference between numb toes and permanent loss. You imagine yourself among them. Fingers tingle painfully, breath burns, body resisting creeping numbness. Complete surrender is dangerous, yet exhaustion pulls relentlessly. Muscles loosen despite risk, lulled by the sea's rhythm. Frostbite at sea is cruelly paradoxical. To rest risks freezing, to stay awake risks collapse. Each night, sailors lay between warmth and death, relying on wool, hides, each other, and perhaps the gods, to survive. The night deepens. You notice some men clutch small objects or wear charms, crude talismans, bones carved with runes, pendants, Thor's hammers, animal teeth on leather. These were not mere decoration but shields of another kind. On land, such items spoke of faith and identity. Aboard the ship, they warded off fear while sleep hovered near. Closing one's eyes without a charm felt like stepping unarmed into battle. You lean closer and notice a sailor's fingers gripping a smoothed bone, faintly etched, as he sleeps more deeply than the others. It seems the object anchors him. Later folklore records that sailors believed charms could protect them from nightmares that crept aboard with the frost. A Thor's hammer might shatter bad dreams. A fox bone might grant cunning to evade spirits in the mist. Holding such a token, its edge pressing into the palm, likely offered comfort. A reminder that, in sleep, the gods or luck stood guard. Not all scholars agree on the seriousness of these beliefs. Some argue the charms were symbolic, no more potent than a child's comfort blanket, while others contend they carried genuine religious or ritual significance. The truth probably lies in between. Watching men shift in their bunks, hands never leaving their amulets, it's clear the belief felt real. The air hums with the peculiar presence of these objects. One sailor murmurs in his sleep, half prayer, half song. Another scratches his chest where a pendant rests, ensuring it hasn't slipped. You sense something beyond the ship, not necessarily divine, but born from human need to find meaning in uncertainty. A tale from Iceland, retold centuries later, describes a sailor who wore a raven's claw around his neck. Mocked by companions for smelling of carrion, he insisted it warned him of storms in dreams. When he survived a shipwreck that drowned others, the story spread, and men began tying bird bones to their belts before sleeping at sea. True or not, the tale lingers like the claw itself, sharp, unsettling. The deck's atmosphere shifts as you notice these small tokens. Cold and the ship's rocking-shaped sleep, but also the weight of belief. Each charm whispers reassurance. You are not alone. You are guarded. Your nightmares cannot win. In this conviction, men release fear enough to rest. You imagine lying among them, clutching a small pendant, perhaps a smooth stone from shore, still holding the memory of land. Rolling it between your fingers, the sea feels less hostile. Symbols gain power not from what they are, but from what men believe them to be. Around you, sailors settle deeper. Their charms rest against skin, bones, and boards. The ship creaks, waves crash, but their breathing steadies. Faith, in gods, trinkets, or superstition, creates a fragile fortress against the night. Within it, uneasy dreams can arrive safely. The deck grows quieter, though the timber's creak never ceases. Then you hear something else, a faint scurrying beneath the planks. Initially, you think it's the hull groaning, but the sound repeats, tiny claws scraping wood. Rats. Shadows reveal small shapes darting along the deck edges, vanishing through cracks, bold enough to share the ship with men. Archaeology confirms it. Rodent remains in harbors and ship burials show that where grain, fish, and hides were stored, vermin followed. Viking ships were no exception. You imagine barrels of dried fish, sacks of grain, the smell attracting uninvited creatures. Sailors endured more than cold, they shared the ship with stowaways with teeth. A Norse anecdote notes that rats were seen as omens. Scurrying toward the prow predicted fair weather, retreating foretold storms. Superstition gave meaning to their nuisance, turning pests into unwitting messengers. Sailors craned their necks, tracking the scurrying shapes as though reading prophets in fur. Scholars debate the severity of rat infestations. Some suggest they survived on scraps alone, others argue they could gnaw provisions and ropes. Concrete evidence is scarce, but the scratching around you confirms their disruptive presence. You watch a sailor shift in sleep, swatting blindly at his cloak where a rat brushed him. He groans, pulls the wool tighter, muttering curses. Another kicks suddenly, sending a rat squeaking. Under the boards. Their rest is broken not just by cold and waves, but by these small invaders. Folklore imagines sailors training shipboard cats to hunt rats, though practicality is doubtful. Still, the image softens the grim picture. A half-starved cat at a warrior's side, each relying on the other for companionship, real or imagined. The smell confirms the truth. Amid salt, tar, and wool, a faint sour stench of rodent nests lingers. The sailors sleep on, too exhausted to care. Over time, irritation becomes part of life at sea, a hardship folded into survival's rhythm. Yet the rats serve another function. They embody life's persistence, thriving in darkness and damp as stubbornly as the men. Perhaps sailors even envied them, unaffected by frostbite or wet cloaks. You lie again among the sleeping men. The scratching continues, blending with waves, creaks, snores, and the soft scurrying of rats, a restless symphony. The sailors twitch and stir but never rise fully. Even in nuisance, exhaustion prevails. Sleep, however restless, eventually arrives. Rats retreat, and the deck falls into uneasy quiet. Overhead, clouds thin, revealing a pale silver wash across the water. Moonlight. Sailors notice it too, eyes opening briefly, drawn to the horizon where the sea glimmers like polished steel. Some linger, staring as if the moon were a lantern hung just for them. Saga poetry confirms that moon and stars guided Viking voyages. Without them, sailors were blind on winter seas. The moon, in particular, offered more than light, orientation, reassurance, even companionship. You see a tired man lift his head from a damp cloak, squinting at the horizon. A soft sigh escapes him as the faint glow reminds him the world stretches beyond darkness. A curious fragment of Icelandic folklore tells of sailors who believed the moon was a shield held by Thor, its bright face guarding them from spirits of the deep. Sleeping beneath such a sky meant resting under divine watch. Imagine their comfort, silver light glimmering on dark waters, offering a sense of safety, however fleeting. Scholars still debate whether these myths influenced navigation or were merely poetic. Some insist sailors relied purely on practical astronomy, while others argue faith and science work together, each supporting the other. The distinction matters little as you observe. The moon shines, the sea reflects it, and weary men draw hope from the sight. A sailor nearby lies on his back, eyes half open, gazing upward. His breath fogs in the cold, lips forming a faint smile. The light softens the lines of exhaustion on his face. Another shifts, pulling his cloak tighter, but leaves one hand free, fingers twitching toward the pale sphere. Though unspoken, the moon becomes part of their dreams, etched into the night like a second half. One odd tradition suggests crews timed their sleep with the moon's phases, believing new moons brought restless nights, while full moons offered calm. Perhaps superstition, or perhaps the extra light truly eased their minds. Tonight, the glow softens shadows, smooths jagged crevices, and you wonder if you would sleep easier under such silver. The deck feels calmer, the sea gentler, though danger remains. The light deceives the senses into peace, and the sailors embrace the illusion. For men exhausted beyond reason, a glimpse of beauty is enough. Sounds soften, the groan of wood blends with wind, snores align with waves. Silver light paints planks, faces, and weapons, making them appear less harsh. For a brief hour, the ship drifts as if sacred, floating in a dream carved in silver. You let yourself sink into it too. The moon hangs above, steady and unchanging, and your body relaxes under its glow. The cold still bites, the planks remain hard, yet the sight comforts you. Perhaps this is why sailors watch the moon before sleep, to remind themselves that even on black seas, beauty persists. And so, they rest again, protected not by walls or fire, but by the moon's steady watch. Its silver reflects on the waves, softening the voyage for just this night. As clouds drift and the moon fades, shadows reclaim the deck. Silence thickens, and you wonder how sailors actually arranged their rest. Did they sleep wherever exhaustion struck, or follow specific routines? This question puzzles researchers trying to understand life aboard these lean, merciless ships. Archaeological digs reveal no fixed bunks. Longships, designed for speed and shallow waters, lacked private chambers. Unlike medieval cogs or later caravels, these vessels were stripped bare, skeletons of planks and beams. Yet traces of mats, woven reeds, and saga accounts suggest improvisation. Did men lay mats on deck or sleep atop sea chests? Evidence hints but does not confirm. Some scholars argue crews carried straw or rush mats, thin cushions against the planks. The reasoning is simple: even the toughest sailors would struggle with weeks on bare wood. Others note space was precious, and mats soaked with salt water could become burdensome. Debate continues as fiercely as the waves. Later folklore adds another detail: sailors reportedly slung ropes or canvas between the ship's ribs to form early hammocks. If true, it would predate European hammocks by centuries. Experimental archaeologists have tested this, stringing cloth on replica longships. The results were awkward but functional, though balance remained precarious. No physical evidence survives, leaving the idea tantalizingly uncertain. The sailors you observe seem unconcerned with scholarly debates. One sprawls atop a chest, head tilted back, cloak draped like a collapsed tent. Another wedges against the hull's curve, body shaped by the ship itself. Their choices are pragmatic, guided by fatigue, not theory. Where exhaustion struck became a bed. An Icelandic tale recalls a crew fighting over the flattest planks, drawing lots each night. You smile at warriors, survivors of storms and battle, quarreling like children over boards. Yet the story resonates. Discomfort magnifies small mercies, and even a smoother plank feels like treasure. You press your palm to the hull. The wood is cold, curved, unyielding. Imagine lying against it for hours, aches creeping into bones. No wonder sailors layered cloaks, stacked shields, or used ropes for padding, each finding a compromise between space, weight, and rest. Privacy is absent. There are no hidden corners, no chambers, no curtains. Every man sleeps in sight of others, snores, twitches, mutterings shared across the crew. Living and sleeping aboard these ships demanded surrendering individuality to the collective rhythm. The sea rocks the vessel, bodies sliding slightly, shoulders bumping. Some stir but do not wake, accustomed to the sway. Their beds prioritize stability over comfort, wedged against masts or chests to avoid rolling with each wave. Where Vikings slept remains a mystery. Were mats common, or reserved for wealthier sailors? Did makeshift hammocks exist, or are they later inventions? Historians still debate. Sailors themselves cared little. They collapsed wherever fatigue allowed, transforming every inch of deck into a reluctant bed. You lie among them now, feeling the plank's hardness against your shoulder. No mattress, no chamber, but it is a place. And for the weary, a place is enough. The darkness stretches on, but gradually a subtle shift moves across the ship. The wind softens, the sea quiets. Tea is the moment just before dawn, when the world seems to hold its breath. Even the sailors respond differently now. Their sleep lightens, limbs twitch, faces crease as if sensing the change in the air. This is the hush before dawn, a fragile calm unlike any other time at sea. Norse sagas and poetry emphasize that dawn held symbolic meaning. The first light represented renewal, the return of divine presence, and the rebirth of the world each day. On land, it signaled fires rekindled. At sea, it offered hope for warmer air or simply relief at surviving another night. You watch the men roll onto their backs, eyes still closed, but breathing quicker, as though their bodies anticipate the sun's arrival. One Icelandic story recounts sailors swearing that dawn itself hummed faintly across the water as light broke. Perhaps it was imagination, perhaps the groan of shifting ice, but they whispered of it every morning. In the silence, you almost hear it too, a soft, barely audible tone carried on the hush. Scholars debate how much actual rest sailors had before dawn. Some claim the pre-dawn hours were shallow sleep, with men half alert for the signal to rise. Others argue that exhaustion pushed them into deeper slumber just before morning. While no firm conclusion exists, the pattern is visible, men hovering between sleep and wakefulness, bodies reluctant to move, minds already scanning the horizon. The ship feels different during this hour. Noises soften. Even the rats pause, seemingly respecting the boundary between night and day. The mast creaks lower, waves splash gently and rhythmically. The air shifts, crisp yet faintly warmer, holding a promise not yet fulfilled. A sailor near you opens his eyes briefly, stares at the dim stars, then closes them. Another mutters under his breath, perhaps a prayer, perhaps reflex. Their faces are pale, lined with frost, but calmer than during the restless night. The hush offers a temporary reprieve, a fragile illusion of peace. Later folklore describes crews believing that spirits left the ship at dawn. If true, this added meaning, not just the arrival of light, but the departure of dread. You smile at the thought of sailors turning over in relief, convinced ghosts had retreated. The first pale streaks of light stretch across the horizon, silvering the sea's edges. Sailors stir more, stretching stiff arms, flexing numb toes, grumbling quietly. None rise fully yet, but the night spell has broken. Dreams scatter like mist, replaced by the dull ache of morning chores. You draw your cloak closer, savoring the last traces of calm. The hush before dawn is fleeting, yet aboard this harsh vessel, it is a rare moment of gentleness. The men may never admit it, but perhaps they cherish this hour most. The stillness, the faint promise, the fragile pause before labor begins again. For now, you lie with them, half asleep, half awake, breathing the crisp air. The horizon brightens slowly, and with it, the reality of another day returns. Yet for a heartbeat longer, the hush lingers, a reminder that even on the coldest seas, silence and peace endure. The pale horizon brightens, yet when you reach across the deck, the chill clings stubbornly. Cloaks, hides, even skin are damp with dew and spray. A sailor tugs his garment tighter and you realize it is not a cloak, but a soaked tunic draped over his chest as makeshift bedding. Archaeological evidence of Viking clothing shows thick wool tunics, trousers, and cloaks, woven for durability. But when storms drenched everything, sailors often had nothing dry. They sometimes slept in sodden garments, spreading spares over themselves as coverings. You imagine the clammy weight pressing down, wool sticky and salty, and wonder how bodies found any comfort. An Icelandic legal tale claims men joked, "Our tunics became second skins of the sea, stiff with salt until they cracked like ice." Grim humor or superstition, it shows how necessity turned misery into ritual. Scholars disagree whether sailors rotated clothing to manage dampness or simply endured whatever they had. Spare garments may have been rationed or scarce. Most sailors relied on what they wore. The scene unfolds clearly, sailors huddled under wet tunics, grumbling even in sleep. You kneel beside one, curled tightly, face glistening with condensation, hair clinging to his forehead. Each breath rises faintly, shoulders trembling in dreams. Beside him, another scratches at his chest where the wool rubs raw. Discomfort is constant, yet exhaustion pulls them under. Folklore even tells of sailors spreading garments on deck to dry, only for gulls to steal scraps for nests. You can imagine the frustration as birds carried away their only bedding. The smell is unmistakable, wet wool, brine, sour sweat. It clings thickly to the air. The sailors cannot escape it. They lie wrapped in the stench, asleep in garments reeking of sea and labor. It is unpleasant, but it is survival. You press your hand against a damp tunic, feeling its weight and texture. Clinging like a soaked rag, yet beneath it, the sailor's chest rises steadily. The body endures what the mind resents. That small warmth, however meager, is better than the cold outside. The deck sways, droplets fall from the rigging, sprinkling the sleepers. They groan, roll over, tug garments tighter. The ship seems determined to keep them damp, yet they persist. They murmur in their sleep, perhaps recalling warm beds ashore, yet their hands never let go of the sodden coverings. You lie back, drawing your own damp tunic tighter across your chest. The wet weight is uncomfortable, but like them, you force yourself to accept it. At sea, you realize, comfort is not the absence of hardship, it is the choice to endure it. Even soaked, even foul-smelling, the garments serve their purpose. So the sailors sleep on, cocooned in dampness, surviving another night. The first pale streaks of dawn appear, but sleep still lingers heavily on the deck. Your gaze shifts to a sailor stirring restlessly, scratching at his scalp. His nails rake through thick hair. Soon another man follows, rubbing at his neck with groggy irritation. You notice it isn't only cold or damp tormenting them, it is the ceaseless crawl of lice and fleas. Night aboard is not merely frost and fatigue, it is itching, scratching, and the constant struggle against tiny intruders. Archaeological finds from Viking burials often reveal finely carved combs made from bone or antler. These were not decorative, they were tools of survival. Grooming hair and beards was one of the few defenses sailors had against vermin in tight quarters. You picture a man drawing such a comb from his pouch before sleep, using it by firelight on land. At sea, however, he must scratch blindly in the dark, muttering curses at invisible pests. Some Norse folklore suggests sailors smeared ashes or sand into their hair and clothing, hoping the grit would repel lice. Imagine lying under a cloak with sand grinding into your skin, the cure scarcely better than the problem. Desperate men tried any remedy they could muster. Experts debate the severity of infestations on long voyages. Some claim they were constant companions, others argue cold weather limited their spread. The evidence remains inconclusive, though seeing sailors scratch in their sleep, tugging at collars and shifting irritably, leaves little doubt of their presence. Nearby, a sailor groans, rolling onto his side, knuckles raking across his arm where fleas have bitten. Another pulls his tunic tighter, as if to hide from them. You can almost feel the irritation yourself, the way in it sharpens when ignored, forcing you awake despite exhaustion. An Icelandic tale recalls sailors laughing at one man who slept so soundly he became a feast for vermin, nicknaming him the banquet. Humor masked misery, better to joke than despair. The air carries a faint sour odor, a mixture of sweat and infestation, clinging to cloaks, hides, and woolen seams. You imagine waking to welts along your arms, scratching until the skin breaks, only to crawl back under a cloak alive with movement. Yet there is no escape. Lice and fleas thrive where bodies press close, garments stay damp, and warmth becomes a trap. Still, the sailors endure, scratching lazily, even in dreams, as if their bodies have accepted the constant irritation. One man claws his scalp, sighs, and drifts back into snoring. Another twitches his leg violently, then grows still. The pest's simply another rhythm of life, no different from the waves or creaks of the ship. You lie among them, feeling phantom itches on your own skin. You scratch where there is nothing, realizing the misery burrows deep into both flesh and mind. Sleep becomes fragile, restless, broken by scratching and shifting, yet exhaustion ultimately prevails. In the end, this too becomes part of a sailor's world, cold, damp, hunger, and pests woven into survival. They sleep despite it because they must. You, scratching along with them, accept the same truth. Discomfort is constant, yet slumber still arrives. Scratching fades, leaving only snores and creaks. Then the ship shifts, and a new sensation rises. Not noise, not motion, but absence. The sea grows eerily calm. The wind pauses. Even rats beneath the planks seem to retreat. It is one of those rare silences when the world itself seems to hold its breath. From the sagas, we know sailors often feared silence at sea more than storms. Noise meant life, waves slapping, wind roaring, ropes singing. Silence, by contrast, carried a weight that felt unnatural, as if the gods themselves had withdrawn. You feel it now, the emptiness pressing in, your own breath amplified in your ears. One fragmentary tale notes that sailors whispered silence meant sea spirits were listening. If true, they hushed themselves, unwilling to disturb whatever unseen presence hovered nearby. You picture men frozen mid-sentence, drawing cloaks over their heads, pretending to sleep. Scholars debate whether these silences were real meteorological lulls or dramatic embellishments. Some claim brief calms occurred in northern seas. Others say the sagas exaggerated them for effect. The debate continues, but the unease aboard is real. Sailors stir in their sleep. One mutters, shifting as though silence has entered his dreams. Another clutches his axe tighter. The absence of sound sharpens instincts more than noise ever could. An oral tradition recalls a sailor waking to such silence, swearing he heard whispers beneath the hull. Companions dismissed it, yet the story persisted. The sea is never truly quiet, only full of sounds too faint for most ears. You imagine him sitting upright, eyes wide, while others roll over, ignoring what they fear they might hear. Silence reshapes every sensation. Frost cracks under your palm. Wool rustles as men move. Your heartbeat thunders in the still air. Every sound amplified, as if the ship itself listens. Moonlight sharpens edges, making faces gaunt, weapons gleam, and shadows stretch unnaturally long across the deck. It is beautiful, yet unnerving. You can understand why the men huddled together in those moments, clinging not just to warmth, but to a sense of reassurance. Slowly, exhaustion begins to push anxiety aside. The sailors close their eyes once more, forcing themselves into rest, even as the quiet presses heavily around them. One snores louder than usual, almost defiantly, challenging the silence itself. Another murmurs a prayer under his breath, words soft but steady. In their persistence lies resilience. You lean back as well, listening to the stillness. It is uncomfortable, yet profound, a reminder that even the sea occasionally pauses. In this fragile moment, the sailors take what they can, a few more minutes of uneasy sleep before the world stirs again. But the calm doesn't last. A low rumble creeps to the edge of hearing. At first, it seems like a dream. Then the deck jolts beneath you, and wind tears through the rigging with a screech. The storm has returned, ending any hope of rest. The men around you stir, not to rise, but to hold fast to the deck, to one another. Sleep is lost to the fury of the waves. From both saga accounts and modern reconstructions, we know storms in the North Atlantic could arrive with terrifying speed. Viking ships, shallow and agile, rode the waves like leaves, but that meant every man aboard felt each violent strike. Sleeping under such conditions was nearly impossible. Survival demanded clinging, not dreaming. You grasp the boards yourself, fingers numb as spray lashes your face. One saga passage notes that some sailors claimed they could sleep through storms by wedging themselves tightly between cargo and hull. Perhaps a few managed, succumbing to sheer exhaustion. Most, however, stayed awake, eyes clenched shut, bodies battered, as if the sea itself tried to shake them loose. Historians remain uncertain how crews balanced vigilance and rest during chaos. Some suggest half the men stayed alert to manage the sails while others took brief naps. Some believe storms simply suspended all rest until calmer waters returned. The lack of certainty mirrors what you see now, men lying horizontal yet mentally alert. The ship bucks violently. A cry pierces the air as one sailor slides across the deck, only saved when another grabs him. Both collapse against the mast, breathing ragged, huddling together. Sleep is out of reach, yet they close their eyes, letting exhaustion drag them into uneasy half-awareness despite the danger. Later folklore recounts a man who claimed he dreamed most vividly during storms. He said the roar of wind and water became the voices of gods, speaking in riddles only he could understand. His companions dismissed it as madness, but you can imagine it. a noise so overwhelming it blends with imagination. Perhaps storms force dreams upon even the unwilling. The sensations overwhelm you. Boards slam like drums beneath your body. Salt spray stings your eyes. Wind tears at cloaks, whipping them against skin like whips. Each wave strikes with the weight of stone. The ship groans, threatening to split. Men cling to timbers, muttering prayers, curses, or nothing at all. Despite terror, some surrender to exhaustion. You notice one sailor slumped against a chest, head lolling, mouth open, hands clutching wood even in sleep. Another lies flat, cloak plastered by spray, eyes closed, breathing steady. The body rests when it must, even if the sea rages. For most, sleep is shattered. They lie awake, bodies shaking, ears filled with the storm's roar, prisoners of the sea, neither fighting nor resting, trapped in limbo. Exhaustion deepens, nerves fray, yet still they endure. What else can they do? The storm rages, tearing the night apart. Beneath it, a truth emerges. Viking sleep was fragile, stolen, never assured. Sometimes the sea permitted it, lulling men with rhythm. Other times it denied it entirely, replacing dreams with terror. Tonight is one of those nights. Clinging beside them, you share their insomnia, waiting for dawn to bring not comfort, but survival. By morning, the storm drifts away, leaving the ship soaked, trembling, and its crew exhausted. Sleep was stolen, but exhaustion still holds them. Men sag where they sit, heads nodding, eyelids heavy. When they collapse again, dreams arrive, strange, fleeting comforts amid misery. These rare dreams become treasures, brief escapes from cold wood and endless waves. Archaeology and sagas alike suggest dreams held meaning for Viking Age people. Some visions were interpreted as omens, warnings, or promises. Others offered warmth or food when neither could be found. You watch a sailor smile faintly in sleep, his face softening. Perhaps he imagines a glowing hearth or fresh bread instead of salted fish. One saga recounts a warrior who longed for battle in dreams, not for glory, but because the fight warmed his frozen body. Relief sometimes came even in visions of violence. You wonder what other strange comforts visited men half-starved, half-frozen, desperate for release. Scholars debate the significance of these dream escapes. Some see them as fatigue or hunger-driven. Others view them as culturally meaningful, reinforcing hearth, kinship, and courage. Whatever the explanation, watching the men before you is enough. Bodies twitching, lips murmuring, faces glowing, proof that dreams offered sanctuary the sea could not. A sailor groans softly, sighing in relief as if something pleasant unfolded behind his eyelids. Another mutters a woman's name, drifting deeper. Breathing evens, limbs loosen. For the first time in nights, rest appears possible. The ship still rocks, planks still drip, but in dreams, the world has shifted. Some folklore claims sailors shared dreams, reporting similar visions upon waking. Perhaps coincidence, or perhaps the shared environment. The same noises, the same smells, shaped imagination in parallel. You picture men laughing softly at dawn, realizing they all dreamed of bread baking or children's laughter, feeling a fleeting sense of connection and relief. The sensations of the sailor's sleep are almost tangible. You sense warmth where there is none, imagine soft earth beneath you instead of the wet wooden planks, and taste something sweet on your tongue. These moments are fragile and fleeting, yet in that instant, they feel more real than the cold gnawing at your toes. Dreams may not alter the sea, but they change the sleeper, even briefly. Not all visions are gentle. A sailor jerks suddenly, his face twisted in fear. He mutters in a half-coherent voice, perhaps replaying a failed raid or imagining the sea swallowing him whole. Nightmares are part of the experience. Yet even after such visions, when he wakes shivering and gasping, there is a fragment of rest. In a place where sleep is scarce, even bad dreams are better than none. They show that the body slipped into true sleep, and the mind escaped reality, however briefly. You close your eyes alongside them. For a fleeting moment, warmth brushes your face, the smell of baking bread fills the air, and laughter echoes faintly. The sea cannot provide these comforts, but the mind can. Viking sailors endured by treasuring such brief comforts, holding dreams as though they were treasure. As dawn stretches, the comfort of sleep lingers, but not all sailors rest peacefully. Some stir uneasily, eyes darting under their lids, murmuring words that sound more like warnings than prayers. When they wake, they whisper to one another, not about hearths or bread, but about something stranger, ghosts and spirits wandering the waves. From sagas and folklore, we know Viking sailors often spoke of encounters with the unseen. The sea was alive, haunted, and unpredictable. Sleeping on open decks beneath the stars, shadows could bend, voices could whisper, and figures could seem to walk just beyond sight. You see a sailor jerk awake, convinced a pale shape passed near his cloak. One Icelandic law account even describes men claiming drowned warriors sometimes boarded at night, not to harm, but to sit silently among the sleepers as warnings of storms or failed raids. Whether hallucination or story, these accounts reveal how easily fatigue and fear could blur perception. Scholars debate their literal truth. Some call them exaggerated tales, others believe sailors genuinely feared spirits. The constant rocking of the ship and absence of daylight likely made dreams and waking visions indistinguishable. Watching the crew, eyes wide in the half-dark, you see the thin line between sleep and fear. One sailor clutches an amulet, whispering a name you cannot hear. Another pulls his cloak over his head, hiding from unseen eyes. Their unease is not from cold or hunger but from something imagined, or sensed, lurking in silence. Some folklore notes that crews left small offerings on deck before sleeping, crumbs of bread, drops of ale, or scraps of dried fish. Part superstition, part bargaining, it was better to honor the spirits than risk their anger. Men whispered as they set these gifts down, then lay back with slightly calmer hearts. The ship's atmosphere shifted. Every creak of timber seemed suspicious, every flicker of moonlight a sign. Exhausted bodies sought sleep, but minds remained alert. Some twitched awake at nothing, others dreamt of faces leaning close and woke in panic. Still, they endured, half laughing at their own fear, half convinced spirits were real. Even for you, the sensations are vivid. You feel the weight of unseen eyes, the hush pressing in as though something waits just beyond the rail. The waves sound quieter, the wind sharper, conspiring to confirm the sailors' fears. You draw your cloak tighter, though it cannot stop the chill creeping from within. Gradually, exhaustion wins. The men settle, charms clutched, cloaks drawn high. Dreams return, whether they hold ghosts or heathfires, no one can say. Even haunted sleep is still sleep, and the body demands it. Morning light finally creeps across the deck, frost clinging to the planks like shards of glass. One by one, sailors stir, stiff and sore rather than refreshed. Their shoulders ache from leaning against wood, fingers are numb from gripping weapons, and faces are drawn from uneasy dreams. Daily life accounts confirm this. Viking crews rarely woke without complaint. A chorus of coughs, cracking joints, and half-hearted curses fills the deck. Morning grievances were almost ritualized. Men boasted about who endured the worst night. "I froze harder than you," one might claim, while another adds, "I had rats at my feet all night." Grim humor helped them face another day, binding them in shared hardship. Scholars debate how much genuine rest these men ever got. Some argue bodies adjusted, numbing themselves to discomfort. Others insist exhaustion accumulated dangerously, eroding health and morale. The truth likely lies between. Each dawn was less about renewal and more about dragging the body forward. You watch sailors rub sore backs, flex stiff hands, scratch at itching scalps, muttering at lice that tormented even their dreams. Their complaints overlap into a grumbling chorus, a rough symphony that strangely unites them. In discomfort, they find unity. Folklore tells of sailors joking that their joints creaked louder than the ship's timbers each morning. Now you understand the truth behind it. The chorus of groans almost matches the creaking wood beneath your feet. Both ship and crew are exhausted, tested by the endless night. The morning air carries a sour mix, sweat baked into wool, stale breath, and the faint scent of rodents, but it blends with something sharper, the salt of the sea and the promise of a new day. The men haul themselves upright, cloaks dragging, and begin to stretch. Movements are sluggish yet necessary, coaxing warmth and blood back into frozen limbs. Complaints surface, but no one lingers. Survival demands action. Weapons are checked, ropes inspected, sails adjusted. Still, the muttering continues. Who dreamed worst, whose cloak was dampest, whose toes froze hardest. It becomes a shared ritual, a way to stitch themselves together. You crouch among them, shoulders aching, back sore from hard planks. The discomfort is real, but so is the camaraderie. In these groans lies proof of endurance. Each man survived another night, and by voicing his pain, he claims victory over it. Morning begins not with cheer but with grumbles, stretches, and the slow acceptance of another day. Their aches are badges, their mutters, a chorus of resilience. You rise with them, weary but moving forward, carried by the same stubborn will. As morning hardens into day, groans fade. Cloaks are shaken out, weapons strapped to belts, and the men resume their places. But something deeper lingers. Nights of cold, damp, and restless sleep have bound the crew in invisible, enduring ways. Viking crews valued loyalty and brotherhood, as sagas and historical records attest. Survival at sea demanded it. Beyond oaths and shared battles, nights spent shivering, scratching lice, or clutching weapons in half-dreams forged connections as strong as iron. You see it in nudges that wake one another, laughter at shared complaints, and the silent trust allowing one to sleep while another keeps watch. Icelandic tales tell of crews remembering every detail of each other's sleeping habits, who snored loudest, muttered prayers, or kicked in dreams years after the voyage. They remembered with laughter, turning misery into cherished memory. Such intimacy, born of hardship, became part of their identity. Scholars debate whether these bonds endured beyond voyages. Some argue men returned quickly to farms and families, while others believe friendships at sea lasted a lifetime, echoed in sagas and poetry. Observing these sailors, the truth feels closer to the latter. Shared suffering outlives distance. The men now stand shoulder to shoulder, not as raiders or rowers, but as brothers forged in sleepless nights. Cold taught dependence, damp demanded patience, silence forced trust. Even rats, fleas, and restless dreams became common foes fought without weapons, relying only on endurance. Folklore notes that some sailors carved runes into the planks where they slept, marking their spots. Long after the voyage, those marks remained, silent signatures of men who survived side by side. You run your hand across the boards, half expecting to feel the faint scratches left by tired hands. Even if gone, the idea persists, proof that nights aboard were not forgotten. The ship moves forward and weariness lifts. Yet the memory of shared hardship lingers, in voices, laughter, and glances. They know what they endured together, and that knowledge is its own treasure. Gold fades, silver tarnishes, but memories of surviving endless winter nights at sea become a legacy, passed in stories. You close your eyes, feeling part of that brotherhood. You too have lain on damp planks, scratched at phantom lice, breathed frost into the air, clutched charms in half-dreams, and endured the long night. Now you rise with them into day. These bonds, born of hardship, will echo for generations. The story of Viking sailors sleeping through harsh winters is not just about discomfort. It is about resilience, connection, and the intimacy forged through endurance. Cruel as the nights were, they created a brotherhood as enduring as the sea itself. The pace softens now. Picture the ship gently rocking, the sea whispering along its sides. The men fade from restless figures scratching in the cold to shadows of memory. Hardship is carried away on the tide. Breathe in the calm. Cloaks dry by firelight, voices soften, laughter becomes gentle. Frost melts, lice vanish, ghosts and whispers dissipate. What remains is the quiet strength of men who endured, and the peace left behind once the story ends. Let your own breathing slow, feel the warmth of blankets not damp or heavy. Let the creak of the ship become the gentle hum of sleep. The voyage is done. The story has ended. The men rest, and so do you. Close your eyes, drift deeper, and let the silence carry you away. Sweet dreams.